Have you heard about the latest debacle with Disney's Snow White? The company made a pretty desperate move this past weekend by putting Snow White back into theaters across about 1,300 screens nationwide. Talk about throwing good money after bad. The results were absolutely dismal. We're looking at just over $200,000 for the entire weekend. When you break that down, it's roughly $50 per screen, which is catastrophically low by any industry standard. This re-release attempt shows just how disconnected Bob Iger and the Disney executive team have become from audience preferences. They genuinely thought giving Snow White one more chance would somehow magically reverse its fortunes. Clearly, that strategy failed spectacularly. What's particularly fascinating is watching the lead actress's response to all this. Rachel Zegler continues her damage control efforts well into May, even as the film prepares for its digital release and eventual streaming debut on Disney Plus coming in June. Instead of acknowledging the film's shortcomings, Zegler has been engaging in serious finger-pointing and blame-shifting about why the movie underperformed. There's something almost pitiable about watching this unfold, especially after this weekend's re-release disaster confirmed what many already knew. Audiences simply aren't connecting with this version of the classic tale. And then there's Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler. The drama that dominated headlines earlier seems to be fading into the background, but Zegler's reputation continues to suffer as she doubles down against critics following the failed theatrical revival. Zegler launched into what can only be described as a frustrated tirade. She argued that we shouldn't judge a film's success solely on box office performance, calling it a superficial metric and suggesting that focusing on financial returns reflects poorly on society. According to her, Snow White was actually successful, despite what the numbers indicate, because it told an important story. She defended their decision to diverge from the source material as necessary to create a character modern women could relate to. Powerful female leader Zegler insisted that obsessing over box office returns is toxic behavior that gives critics an excuse to attack female-oriented films. Perhaps most controversially, she suggested the film was targeted because it stars people from diverse ethnic backgrounds, essentially accusing critics of racism and sexism. She claimed the only argument against the film was that it stars a woman and complained about how politics have become entangled with the movie's reception. Zegler detailed, came with personal sacrifices she made for the role, including 16-hour days in costume and the psychological toll of embodying a Disney princess from a different era. She portrayed herself as a dedicated artist whose work wasn't being properly appreciated because of societal biases. The irony here is palpable when you consider that many observers feel Zegler herself introduced politics into the conversation about Snow White from the beginning. Her previous comments on social media, blending the film and politics in the same context, created controversy that a major studio representative typically avoids. This behavior is reportedly why many studios are now reluctant to work with her, limiting her to smaller roles and lower budget productions. Her upcoming project with Marissa Tomei exemplifies this career trajectory. It's a small-budget film that will likely see limited theatrical release, perhaps signaling where Zegler's career might be heading in 2026 or beyond. Zegler's complaints didn't stop there. She continued lamenting how the public doesn't understand the challenges actresses face in bringing characters to life and achieving their creative potential. In her view, there's widespread unfairness in American society toward film as an art form. She specifically blamed one side of the country for preventing films from performing well, due to their biased opinions and political perspectives that interfere with the industry's ability to attract viewers and create something magical. This approach stands in stark contrast to how other Hollywood figures handle similar situations. Take Tom Cruise, for example. When recently questioned about whether tariffs might have affected his film, he simply redirected the conversation. "Let's just talk about the movie." That professional response effectively ended the political line of questioning and kept the focus on his work. Interestingly, some in Hollywood apparently took offense at Cruise's handling of the situation, but many industry observers consider him one of the last true movie stars who maintains professional boundaries by focusing solely on promoting his films without dragging politics into the conversation. He understands something fundamental that Zegler seems to miss. Alienating potential viewers with political commentary ultimately hurts a film's prospects. This divergence of approaches highlights a significant shift happening in Hollywood right now. Some studios are moving away from DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, while others, like HBO, are doubling down, regardless of political pressures, including those from the current presidential, Disney, and the broader entertainment world responds to this wake-up call. The catastrophic box office numbers of the Snow White re-release aren't just about a single movie flopping. They represent a deep and widening rift between creators and consumers. When you take a well-known, culturally significant tale and alter its fundamental elements, you're not just telling a new version, you're taking a risk on alienating those who loved the original. Studios used to earn loyalty through timeless storytelling. Today, many are banking on ideological alignment and social messaging to drive interest. But when the execution feels forced, audiences don't just walk away, they push back. The poor turnout proves that legacy IP alone can't guarantee success. When people feel like they're being lectured rather than entertained, that's the crux of what industry insiders are watching. Will Disney acknowledge the audience rejection and course correct? Or will they double down, hoping time and repetition can soften resistance? The answer may not only shape Disney's future, but serve as a signal for the rest of Hollywood. Disney responds to this failure. Will they course correct for future live-action adaptations? The company has several other reimagined classics in various stages of production, and the Snow White debacle could potentially influence their creative and marketing approaches going forward. For Zegler personally, this situation represents a critical career juncture. Young actors often face challenging transitions after high-profile roles, but few have experienced such public scrutiny and polarization. Her response to criticism will likely influence casting decisions for years to come, as studios increasingly consider an actor's public persona and social media presence when making hiring decisions. The discussion around Snow White also highlights the changing audience expectations. While some viewers embrace modernized retellings of classic stories, others clearly prefer adaptations that remain faithful to the original, closer to the original material they grew up with. Finding the balance between honoring beloved classics and making them relevant for contemporary audiences remains one of Hollywood's greatest challenges. What's certain is that the conversation around this film has extended far beyond its artistic merits to become a flashpoint in broader cultural debates about representation, creative license, and the relationship between politics and entertainment. As the digital and streaming releases approach, Disney executives will undoubtedly be analyzing what went wrong and how to avoid similar missteps with future projects. Beyond the immediate financial implications, this Snow White situation serves as a critical lesson for the studio moving forward. This situation reveals deeper issues about how Hollywood navigates changing cultural landscapes. The film industry currently finds itself in a precarious position, trying to modernize classic stories while not alienating longtime fans who have emotional connections to the originals. The situation with Rachel Zegler highlights a generational and philosophical divide in how celebrities approach their public persona. Traditionally, stars were advised to avoid controversial topics to maintain broad appeal. Today, many younger performers feel not only entitled, but obligated to voice their opinions on social and political matters. The question becomes, at what point does this expression begin to impact their marketability? Industry analysts have noted that studios are increasingly caught between competing priorities. On one hand, they face pressure to demonstrate progressive values through their creative choices. On the other, they must deliver financial returns to shareholders who care primarily about profitability. Snow White's performance suggests there may be limits to how far audiences will follow when beloved classics are substantially reimagined. What's particularly interesting is the disconnect between how Zegler perceives the film's reception and what the numbers actually indicate. Her insistence that box office metrics shouldn't define success runs counter to the fundamental business reality of filmmaking. While artistic expression is vital, commercial viability remains a non-negotiable factor in the industry. Artistic merit certainly matters, but studios ultimately cannot justify $200 million production budgets for films that fail to generate proportional revenue. The small per-screen average from the re-release attempt is especially telling. With just $50 per screen, we're talking about theaters selling perhaps 5 or 6 tickets per showing, essentially empty theaters. No amount of artistic rationalization can spin this as anything but a rejection by the intended audience. For Disney specifically, this represents a challenging moment of self-reflection. The company built its empire on these classic animated tales, and the live-action remake strategy initially proved incredibly lucrative, with films like Beauty and the Beast and The Jungle Book. But recent entries have shown diminishing returns, suggesting possible audience fatigue or growing resistance to significant departures from the originals. Some industry observers predict we'll see a strategic pivot from Disney in how they approach these remakes going forward. There's speculation that future adaptations might adhere more closely to the original animations that audiences know and love, rather than attempting substantial reinventions. As for Zegler's career trajectory, her transition to smaller, independent projects might actually prove beneficial. In the long run, many successful actors have rebuilt their reputations through thoughtful performances in smaller films after high-profile missteps. The rumored low-budget collaboration with Marissa Tomei could provide exactly the kind of artistic credibility she needs to reorient her career path. What remains unresolved is whether Hollywood at large will Hollywood learn anything meaningful from this episode. The tensions between commercial expectations, artistic vision, and audience preferences show no signs of simple resolution. Each studio continues to navigate these waters differently, with varying degrees of success. The industry-wide experimentation with DEI initiatives continues to evolve, with some companies retreating while others advance. This lack of consensus reflects broader societal disagreements about how best to address representation in media. What's clear is that audiences respond most enthusiastically to stories that feel authentic, rather than didactic, regardless of the specific creative choices involved. As Snow White prepares for its digital and streaming debut, Disney executives will be closely monitoring those numbers to determine whether different distribution channels might connect more effectively with potential viewers. The traditional theatrical window is just one part of a film's commercial life cycle, and sometimes movies find their audience through alternative platforms. Ultimately, the Snow White situation serves as a case study in the complex interplay between art, commerce, and cultural politics in 21st century Hollywood. The lessons learned or ignored will shape how studios,